By now, in this series, one thing is clear. Photography is never neutral. Every picture comes from somewhere, from someone's point of view. Each image is shaped by choices. The camera, the lens, the angle, even the distance from the subject. Even the act of pressing the shutter, this moment, not the next, is already an interpretation. Walking too is never neutral. Each step reflects choices, conscious or unconscious. The pace, fast or slow, changes what is seen and how it is seen. The walker's gait, their rhythm, determines the experience of space. The route also matters, whether the walk follows a straight line between 2 points or drifts aimlessly through side streets. And that brings us here, Episode 8 of Photography and Walking, where we look at one of the most ambitious projects to explore that connection, Sohei Nishino's diorama maps. Encounters shape the walk as much as intention does. You turn into a narrow passageway and discover it ends abruptly. Do you stop, turn back, or go all the way to the wall just to see what's there? Do you cross the street or linger? Each gesture is a framing, as decisive as a camera angle. So both photography and walking are acts of selection, of inclusion and exclusion. What is chosen and what is left out. What comes into the frame and what falls away. And this is where this episode begins, with the recognition that neither the photograph nor the walk is ever simply given. They are both ways of staging the world. Sohei Nishino, a Japanese photographer born in 1982, began this diorama maps project in the early 2000s and has since mapped cities across the world. He walks a city for weeks or months, shooting thousands of photographs along the way. Then back in the studio, he develops and prints contact sheets, cuts out individual frames, and assembles them by hand into huge collages. The result is a kind of map, but one that has little to do with cartographic precision. Back in 2013, I found myself in Chicago at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. I had gone there to see an exhibition titled Of Walking. Karen Irvine, the curator, welcomed me and we talked through the show together. I later published an article about it in Ciel Variable magazine, and that visit has stayed with me. One of the works that really struck me that day was the work of Sohei Nishino. His diorama maps filled the room with a strange energy. At first glance, the large photographic black and white prints looked like cityscapes, vast, sprawling views of urban space. But as you moved closer, you realized they were built from thousands of tiny photographs. Standing in front of these, I felt a strong pull towards the small fragments. The word diorama might make you think of a school project or a museum display, but in photography's history it goes back further. In the 1820s, Louis Daguerre and Charles Bouton staged giant painted scenes in Paris that shifted as light changed, creating an early form of immersive theater. Nishino's city maps work a little like modern dioramas. They're not single snapshots, but layered views built from fragments of many walks. Just as the old dioramas asked people to let their eyes wander through changing scenes, Nishino invites us to wander across his collages, piecing together a city that feels like both a picture and an experience of moving through space. What's striking is how these maps feel at once panoramic and intimate. From a distance you see a whole city, Tokyo, London, Istanbul, spread out as though you could navigate it. Step closer, and you're pulled into the details. A couple crossing the street, a shop window, a bus turning a corner. Each fragment carries the grain of a single moment, but together they form a dense tapestry of experience. The method mirrors walking itself. When you move through a city, you don't take it all in at once. You accumulate impressions. This corner, that sound, a sudden shaft of light. Later, in memory, the work of stitching these fragments into something like a whole is done. Nishino just makes that process visible. We live in an age when digital tools can stitch panoramas in seconds. Nishino rejects that speed. Rather than stitching panoramas instantly, he takes a slower path. Months spent walking and photographing, long hours in the darkroom, and meticulous cutting and pasting of contact print fragments into sweeping collages. Only after that does he rephotograph and digitally stitch for the final high-res print. The scale of labor is almost medieval, like building a cathedral out of small stones. And yet what he's making is a picture of modern urban life, chaotic, layered, always shifting. There's something deeply democratic about the way his maps level detail. A grand landmark, the Eiffel Tower, say, sits beside an ordinary bus stop, both given equal weight in the collage. The city appears not as a hierarchy of monuments, but as a fabric pieced together from countless encounters. So, for me, this connects back to walking as a way of knowing. Nishino doesn't claim authority as a cartographer. His maps are subjective, partial, full of gaps. But that's what makes them powerful. They remind us that every city is lived differently, seen differently, walked differently. A city is not just its official plan, it's the sum of all the footsteps that pass through it. And Nishino's own footsteps matter here. While he takes many of his pictures from high angles, he doesn't hover above the city. He's on the ground, moving, sweating, getting lost, retracing his steps. That presence is folded into the work. It's not a view from nowhere, but a view from inside the flow. If we think of photography as a way to stop time, Nishino complicates that. His maps are made of thousands of stops, yes, but assembled into a picture that feels alive, unstable, always on the edge of shifting again. Here, the photograph becomes not a frozen instant, but a layered duration. There's also a quiet humor in his work. Streets bend in impossible ways, rivers tilt uphill, neighborhoods overlap. The maps are playful in their distortions, reminding us that walking doesn't always make sense, and that memory rarely aligns with official topography. Looking at one of these collages can feel like looking at your own mental map of a city you know well. Certain routes stand out in bold detail, others fade to nothing. The scale is uneven, stretched where you lingered, compressed where you hurried. Nishino just externalizes that inner cartography. It also resonates with how we often move through cities while photographing them, how we now travel with cameras in our pockets. We return from a trip with hundreds of small pictures. The scroll becomes a personal map of attention. Nishino crafts a monumental version of that everyday archive, guided not by an algorithm, but by a sharp eye. But what keeps it from being just accumulation is the sense of rhythm. His editing eye guides the flow, just as walking itself has a tempo. The collages pulse with density and pause, like footsteps speeding up or slowing down. In that sense, his work is not just about cities, but about movement itself. And maybe that's why these maps feel so alive. They're not just records of places. They're records of being there, of moving through streets, of weaving time into image. They remind us that walking is never neutral. Each step carries a way of seeing, and each photograph a way of remembering. In the end, Nishino's maps remind us that cartography is never just about space. It's about experience, fragments stitched together like memory itself. Images from Nishino's series and the sources for this episode are on the episode page at photographyandwalking.com. You'll also find extras and outtakes on Instagram. Thank you for listening.